A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to My Weird Prompts. I am Herman, and I am sitting here in our living room in Jerusalem with my brother. It is a beautiful evening here. The sun is just starting to dip behind the Judean hills, and we have the microphones set up for what I think is going to be one of our most requested deep dives.
Herman Poppleberry, at your service. It is good to be back at the microphones. Usually, we are diving into a prompt sent over by our housemate Daniel, but today we actually decided to pick the topic ourselves. It is something that has been coming up in our house discussions quite a bit lately, especially given where we live and the world we move in. We are surrounded by tech hubs and security infrastructure, and the line between the two is getting thinner every single day.
Right, we wanted to look at the LinkedInification of espionage. If you spend any time on professional networking sites these days, especially in 2026, you start seeing something that would have been unthinkable 20 or 30 years ago. You see people openly listing their background in the Central Intelligence Agency or Government Communications Headquarters in the United Kingdom, or certainly Unit 8200 here in Israel. The shadowy world of intelligence is moving into the light of the recruitment funnel, and it is creating this fascinating tension between institutional secrecy and the modern reality of the talent market.
It really is a paradox. On one hand, these agencies need to maintain absolute operational security to function. On the other hand, they are in a desperate, high-stakes war for talent against companies like Google, OpenAI, and Palantir. If you are a 24-year-old coding prodigy or a brilliant data scientist, the government has to give you a reason to choose a cubicle in a windowless basement over a high-rise in San Francisco with a massive signing bonus and free artisanal kombucha on tap.
And that is what we are going to dig into today. We are looking at the modern intelligence workforce. We want to talk about the pay, the attrition rates, the age limits, and specifically this cultural shift where former intelligence officer has become a powerful personal brand. Is the career of a spy now just another tech job with a high-level security clearance? We are going to look at the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, GCHQ, and of course the Israeli powerhouses like the Mossad and Unit 8200.
That is the big question, and I think to answer it, we have to look at how the employer brand of these agencies has changed. You look at GCHQ in the United Kingdom, or even the CIA lately, they are incredibly active on Instagram and Twitter. They are putting out puzzles, logic games, and recruitment videos that look like they were produced by a Silicon Valley startup. They are trying to solve a massive talent gap by convincing the new guard that the mission is worth the pay cut. They are not just looking for James Bond anymore. They are looking for the person who can build the algorithm that finds James Bond.
Which leads us perfectly into the meat of the discussion. Let's start with the money because that is often where the rubber meets the road. If you are looking at the Central Intelligence Agency or the National Security Agency in the United States, you are looking at the General Schedule Pay Scale. For those who do not know, that is the standardized pay system for federal employees. Corn. What does that actually look like for someone coming in with high-tech skills in 2026?
It is a tough sell, Herman. If you are a top-tier cybersecurity expert or a machine learning engineer, you might enter at a General Schedule 12 or 13 level. In 2026 dollars, depending on the locality pay for the Washington, D.C. area, you might be looking at somewhere between $115,000 and $155,000 a year. Now, to a lot of people, that sounds like a great salary. But if you compare that to the private sector, where that same individual could be pulling in $350,000 or $450,000, when you include restricted stock units and performance bonuses, the mission tax is over 60%.
A 60% mission tax. That is a heavy lift for someone with a mortgage or a family. And it is not just the base pay, right? It is the flexibility. In the private sector, you have remote work, you have equity that could turn into millions if the company goes public, and you have a much faster promotion cycle. Government bureaucracies are famously slow. You have to wait for your time and grade before you can even apply for a promotion.
They are slow, but the agencies do have a few cards to play. There is what we call the clearance premium. Once you have a top secret sensitive compartmented information clearance, your value in the private sector actually goes up if you ever decide to leave. Defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, or the newer tech-first firms like Anduril will pay a massive premium for people who have already been vetted. It can cost a company $50,000 and over 18 months of waiting to get a new hire cleared from scratch. So, the government pays for the training and the vetting, and the employee gets a lifelong credential that essentially guarantees they will never be unemployed.
So it is almost like a subsidized graduate degree in a way. You put in your 5 to 7 years, you get the golden ticket of the clearance, and then you punch out to a six-figure job at a contractor. But that creates a massive attrition problem for the agencies, does it not? If everyone is just there for the golden ticket, how do you maintain a stable workforce?
It is a huge problem. Attrition is one of the biggest challenges facing the intelligence community today. In some technical departments at the NSA, the average tenure is dropping toward the 4-year mark. It used to be that you joined the agency for life. You were a silent professional who retired with a gold watch and a secret commendation. Now, many young officers see it as a 3 to 5 year stint to build their resume. The agencies are essentially becoming the world's most expensive training ground for the private sector.
And that is a fascinating shift in the culture of secrecy. Let's talk about that LinkedIn aspect. I see people all the time who list former analyst at the Central Intelligence Agency or military intelligence officer. How is that even allowed? I thought the first rule of the CIA was that you do not talk about the CIA.
It is a common misconception. For the vast majority of employees, especially those in analytical, technical, or support roles, the fact of their employment is not classified. What is classified are the specific methods, the sources, the specific targets, and the ongoing operations. You cannot post a selfie from inside the SCIF, which is the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, but you can certainly tell a future employer that you worked for the government. In fact, the CIA has a pre-publication review board that reviews resumes and LinkedIn profiles for former employees to make sure they are not accidentally leaking something sensitive.
But there is a difference between telling a future employer in a private interview and putting it in a public-facing profile for the whole world to see. Does that not create a target on your back? If I am a foreign intelligence service, I am just scraping LinkedIn for everyone who says they worked at the NSA.
It absolutely does. And this is where the old guard and the new guard really clash. There is a lot of internal disdain from the older generation of officers toward this LinkedInification. They view it as a violation of the quiet professional ethos. They worry that by publicizing your background, you are making yourself a target for foreign intelligence services who are looking for people to recruit, compromise, or simply track. We actually touched on this back in episode 7 on 79 when we talked about operational security in the digital age. If a foreign power knows exactly who worked in a specific department at the NSA, they can track those people for the rest of their lives, seeing where they go in the private sector and what they are working on next.
Right. And with the AI tools available in 2026, that tracking is easier than ever. You can build a complete map of an agency's internal structure just by aggregating LinkedIn data. But if the agencies want to hire the best talent, they have to allow some level of public recognition. If you tell a 22-year-old that they have to disappear from the internet for the next decade, they are going to say, no thanks, and go work for a fintech startup where they can post their day in the life videos on TikTok.
It is a compromise the agencies have had to make. They have even started providing unclassified resumes for departing employees. They will help you translate your secret work into corporate speak. So instead of saying, I ran a network of human assets in Eastern Europe to identify missile silos, your resume might say, I managed a diverse team of international contractors in a high-pressure environment to achieve strategic goals and risk mitigation.
That is hilarious. Manage international contractors. It sounds so corporate and bland, but it covers the reality of the work. Now, what about the specific skills they are looking for? You mentioned coding, but there is also a huge move toward OSINT, or Open Source Intelligence. Is that a specific job title now?
It is. This is one of the biggest shifts in the last 10 years. Historically, intelligence was about the secrets you could steal through spies or satellites. Now, so much vital information is hiding in plain sight. It is in satellite imagery you can buy commercially. It is in social media posts. It is in shipping manifests, property registries, and even fitness tracker data. Agencies are now hiring OSINT practitioners specifically. These are people who are experts at navigating the digital ocean. They are often librarians, data scientists, and journalists by training.
And that is a skill set that exists entirely in the unclassified world. You do not need a secret lab to practice OSINT, you just need a laptop, a very specific type of analytical brain, and maybe a few subscriptions to commercial data providers. Does that make the recruitment easier?
It makes the recruitment broader, but the competition is even fiercer. Every major hedge fund, every large corporation, and every investigative journalism outlet wants those same OSINT skills. If you are the person who can track a specific Russian oligarch's yacht using only Instagram photos and port records, you are a very valuable person in 2026. The private sector pay for OSINT experts is skyrocketing because it is clean intelligence. You can use it in a boardroom or a court of law without worrying about revealing classified sources.
I want to pivot a bit to the age limits, because that is something people always ask about. If I am 45 years old and I have a midlife crisis and decide I want to be a spy, am I out of luck?
For the clandestine service, which is the field agent side of things, the answer is generally yes. In the United States, the typical cutoff for the CIA's core collector program is around 35. They want people who are young enough to put in a full 20-year career and who can handle the physical and mental rigors of being overseas in high-threat environments. There are waivers, of course, for people with extremely rare languages or specialized technical skills, but they are the exception.
35 seems young, especially for technical roles. If you want a world-class expert in AI or cryptography, that person might not even hit their prime until their late 30s or early 40s. They have spent 15 years at Google or Microsoft and now they want to serve their country. Are they really going to be turned away?
And that is exactly where the waivers and the different directorates come in. For the Directorate of Science and Technology or the Directorate of Digital Innovation, the age limits are much more flexible. They understand that a 40-year-old who has spent 20 years at a top-tier tech firm is more valuable than a 22-year-old who just graduated. But the bureaucratic hurdles are still there. You still have to pass the polygraph, the background check, and the psychological evaluation. For many mid-career professionals, that level of intrusion into their private life is a deal-breaker. They do not want to explain a trip they took to Southeast Asia 15 years ago to a polygraph examiner.
Let's look at the Israeli model, because it is so different from the American or British one. We live here in Jerusalem, and the culture around Unit 8200 is just fascinating. It is almost the opposite of the quiet professional model in some ways. It is more like a loud professional model.
It really is. In Israel, serving in Unit 8200, which is the signal intelligence branch, is seen as the ultimate elite credential. It is more prestigious than going to the best universities. When these kids get out after their mandatory service, or a few extra years of professional service, they are immediately scouted by venture capitalists. There is an entire ecosystem built around 8200 alumni.
It is almost like a state-sponsored startup incubator. You have these 20-year-olds who are given massive responsibility and access to the most advanced technology in the world. When they finish their service, they do not just put it on LinkedIn, they build their entire company around that alumni network. They use the brand to get funding.
There is an estimate that alumni of Unit 8200 have founded over 1,000 startups. In Israel, the secrecy is focused on the specific operations, not the affiliation. Everyone knows you were in 8200. It is a point of immense national pride, and that creates a very different attrition dynamic. The government knows they are going to lose these people to the private sector, so they lean into it. They treat the service as a high-intensity training ground that benefits the entire national economy. It is a revolving door by design.
So the revolving door is actually a feature of the system here, rather than a bug. It keeps the Israeli tech sector at the cutting edge because the graduates take that mission-oriented, high-pressure mindset into the commercial world. But does that work for an agency like the CIA or the Mossad? The Mossad is much more like the CIA in its secrecy, right?
Much more so. The Mossad is the external intelligence agency, and they maintain a much higher level of anonymity. You do not see people listing former Mossad officer on LinkedIn nearly as often as you see 8200. However, even the Mossad has started a venture capital fund called Libertad. They are openly investing in startups that develop technologies they might need, things like robotics, energy harvesting, or advanced encryption. It is a way to stay connected to the private sector without necessarily bringing everyone onto the government payroll. They are essentially outsourcing their research and development to the startup world.
That is a brilliant move. If you cannot beat the private sector pay, you just become a venture capitalist and partner with them. But let's go back to that internal disdain point. I am curious about the social consequences of going public. If you are a former CIA officer and you start a podcast or write a book or become a talking head on the news, do your former colleagues still talk to you, or are you dead to them?
It depends on how you do it. There is a very thin line between sharing your expertise and cashing in on the brand. If you are seen as someone who is using the agency's name to sell a mediocre product or to puff yourself up as some kind of action hero, the bridge is burned. There is a feeling that you are monetizing the mission. But if you move into corporate security or policy analysis and you use your background to provide genuine value, people respect that. The old guard still grumbles, but the reality is that almost everyone eventually leaves, and they all need to find a second career.
It is a bit of a clearance trap, though, isn't it? If you stay too long, you become institutionalized and your skills might become too niche for the private sector. If you leave too early, you are seen as a tourist by the lifers.
That is a great way to put it. The clearance trap is real. If you spend 20 years in a highly classified environment, you might find that you have forgotten how to function in a normal corporate setting. You are used to having a support staff for everything. You are used to a very specific type of hierarchy, and you are used to not being able to tell your spouse what you did at work. Transitioning to a world where you have to self-promote and network can be a huge culture shock. Some people never quite make the jump. They end up just bouncing between different government contractors because it is the only world they understand.
I think we should talk about the impact of high-tech warfare on this whole dynamic. We discussed this a bit in episode 895 about the human element in high-tech war. The pace of change in 2026 is so fast that government bureaucracies literally cannot keep up. If it takes 18 months to get a security clearance, by the time the person starts, the technology they were hired to work on might already be obsolete.
That is the existential threat to traditional intelligence agencies. The cycle time of innovation in the private sector is weeks or months. In the government, it is years. This is why you see the rise of hybrid roles and public-private partnerships. The agencies are realizing they have to bring in experts in residence or use contractors for the heavy lifting on the tech side. The line between a government employee and a private contractor is blurring. In many offices at the NSA, you have people sitting side by side doing the same work, but one is making GS-13 pay and the other is a contractor making double that.
So the spy of 2026 is less likely to be James Bond in a tuxedo, and more likely to be a data scientist in a hoodie who works for a contractor but has a government clearance.
The data analyst reality has largely overtaken the secret agent mythos. Of course, you still need people on the ground. You still need human intelligence, people who can walk into a room and read a person's intentions. But even those people are now supported by a massive digital tail. Every move they make is tracked by satellites, facial recognition, and signal intercepts. The fieldwork is now just one small part of a much larger data-driven operation. If you cannot navigate the digital world, you cannot survive in the physical one.
Which brings us to the practical takeaways for our listeners. We have a lot of tech-focused people in our audience. If someone is sitting there thinking, should I join an intelligence agency in 2026? What is the honest advice?
The first thing I would say is, do it for the mission, not the money. If you are looking for a high salary career path, stay in the private sector. You will always be behind the curve in the government. But if you want to work on problems that literally do not exist in the corporate world, problems of national survival, of stopping major cyber attacks, of understanding global shifts before they happen, there is nothing like it. You will see things and do things that are at the very edge of what is humanly possible.
And the clearance. Do not underestimate the value of that golden ticket. Even if you only stay for 4 or 5 years, having that top secret clearance on your record is a massive hedge against economic instability. You will always be employable in the defense and intelligence ecosystem. It is a form of job security that a Silicon Valley startup just cannot offer.
That is a very practical point, Herman. But you also have to be prepared for the clearance trap. You have to make sure you are keeping your skills market relevant. Do not let yourself become so specialized in a government-only tool that you cannot code in a standard language or use standard OSINT tools when you leave. You have to maintain your civilian skills while you are on the inside.
And what about the LinkedIn-ification? Should a young officer plan to use their service as a brand?
I would say, be careful. The world of 2026 is very small. Your digital footprint is permanent. If you plan to have a career in international business or travel to certain parts of the world, having former intelligence officer plastered all over your internet presence might not be the asset you think it is. It might actually be a liability. You have to weigh the cool factor of the brand against the long-term operational security of your own life. Once you put it out there, you can never take it back.
That is a heavy thought. The trade-off between the cool factor and the reality of the cubicle. Most of these jobs at the end of the day involve a lot of paperwork, a lot of meetings, and a lot of staring at screens in a room with no windows. It is not all high-speed chases and secret handshakes.
Not at all. It is a government job. There is red tape, there is limited budget for coffee, and the computers are often 10 years old because they have to be hardened against cyber attacks. But when the phone rings at 3 in the morning because something is happening on the other side of the world and you are the only one who can analyze the data, that is when it all becomes worth it. That is the mission that keeps people in those windowless rooms despite the pay cut.
I think that is a perfect place to start wrapping this up. We have covered the pay gap, the attrition issues, the age limits, and this fascinating cultural shift toward a more open secret world. It is clear that the agencies are evolving, but they are doing so under immense pressure from the private sector.
They are. The secret agent is becoming a data analyst, and the silent professional is becoming a LinkedIn influencer. It is a strange time to be in the business of secrets. The very thing that makes you valuable, your ability to keep a secret, is now in direct conflict with your ability to build a career in the modern economy.
It really is. And hey, if you've been enjoying our deep dives into these topics, we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show, and we love reading your feedback. We are trying to hit some big milestones this year, and every review helps.
It really does make a difference. We are coming up on episode 1000 soon, which is just wild to think about. Thank you all for being part of this journey with us. We have listeners in over 100 countries now, which is just mind-blowing.
You can find all of our past episodes, including those ones we mentioned today about OSINT and OPSEC, at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We have a full archive there and an RSS feed if you want to subscribe directly. We also have a newsletter where we share some of the research that didn't make it into the final script.
Thanks to our housemate Daniel for not sending a prompt today so we could talk about this. We will probably be back to his weird ideas next week. I think he mentioned something about the philosophy of sentient vending machines.
Oh boy, I am looking forward to that one. This has been My Weird Prompts. I am Herman Poppleberry.
And I am Corn. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will see you next time.
Until next time.
So, Herman, before we go, I have to ask, if you were 22 today, would you take the GS7 salary to go work at the fort?
You know, the sloth in me loves a good stable environment and a clear mission, but the tech nerd in me would probably struggle with the old hardware. I think I would do it for 4 years, get the clearance, and then go build something. What about you?
I think as a donkey, I would find the pace of government bureaucracy quite comfortable. I like a steady path. But the polygraph, I do not think I could handle someone asking me that many personal questions. I like my secrets. I do not want to talk about my childhood to a guy in a suit with a heart rate monitor.
That is fair. The polygraph is a deal breaker for a lot of people. It is a very strange way to start a job. It is basically a trust but verify session that lasts for 6 hours.
Have you ever committed a crime for which you were not caught? That is a tough one for a Tuesday morning, even if the answer is just, I once accidentally stole a pen from the bank.
All right, we are actually leaving now. Thanks again, everyone.
Goodbye.
This is a long one, Corn. We really went deep today. I hope people find the economic side of it as interesting as we do.
There is just so much to say about the economics of it. People do not realize how much the clearance market dictates the entire economy of Northern Virginia and parts of Maryland. It is a shadow economy all its own.
And here in Israel, it is the entire center of the country. Every high-rise in Tel Aviv is filled with people who learn their craft in a uniform. It is the engine of the startup nation.
It is the ultimate dual-use technology, the human brain trained by the state.
Well said. All right, for real this time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
One more thing. I wanted to mention that if people are interested in the specific age limits, they should check the official recruitment sites like ca.gov or gcheeksq.gov.uk. They change more often than you would think as they try to adapt to the talent market.
Good point. Always go to the source for the latest requirements, and don't believe everything you see in the movies.
Okay, now we are done.
Done. See you next week.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, my weird prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the flows from sloth.